Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to Synchronicity Web TV. I am your host, Nadiya Shah, and this is your moment of synchronicity. Well, I'm so excited to celebrate with you. Once again, my friend Michael Barwick is back here at Synchronicity Web TV. Now, you've seen him so many times on my channel. He is a Synchronicity University favorite as well. And you know that he is the person that I go to when I want astrological advice on my chart. And he has just such a wealth of knowledge of techniques and history and so much more. Well, as I said, he's a Synchronicity University favorite, and Michael Barwick is back. And this time he's going to be teaching a 5-week course all about relationships, helping you to understand love from all kinds of angles in your own chart, in the synastry, in the composite, and so much more. You're going to understand your relationships with a whole other depth and understanding from an astrological perspective with this incredible master teacher, my friend, the one and only. I got to tell you, you've got just a few weeks left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class, with the one and only Michael Barwick. Michael, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you, Nadiya. You know that.
Yes, we love hanging out. We hang out when there are not cameras. We hang out when we are not on Zoom. We hang out in person, in cities, and all kinds of places. Yes, we hang out online, wherever we go. And so I just love how much you help me to understand my own chart and understand astrology so much. You know that. I just think you're one of the best out there. I love sharing you. And so, yes, you are coming back to Synchronicity University. Tell me about your course, Michael Barwick.
Well, it's a 5-week course in relationships, applying relationships, relationship techniques. So you can't, the course will teach a simple method of comparing two charts and being able to gain insights through the comparison of two charts. And we'll look at some famous examples of famous relationships that change people's lives, change the direction of people's lives, and are publicly known. So we'll have examples to look at in terms of understanding, gain an understanding of relationships. But very much, the focus is around taking astrology and looking at it from that relationship perspective. So much of what we see in astrology talks about us, me, my individual characteristics, my talents, my challenges, my capabilities. Whereas so much of us is defined more by the quality of our relationships with others, and not just the significant love of our life, but also if we are lucky enough to find a significant love in our life, but also in terms of every other relationship that we have, because they're all relationships, whether it be with our parents, with our siblings, with other relatives, with ourselves, and so on. And astrology provides us a way of gaining insight into those relationship pieces through the various symbols reinterpreted from a relationship-centered perspective.
I mean, I know that love is one of the big things that people always ask about where it comes to an astrological reading or insight. They always want to understand the charts. What's happening? Is there a connection? Is there a karmic connection? Are we soulmates, right? This is something lots of people will ask an astrologer. And so how would you answer something like that if someone says, here's this person, I am dating this person, here's their birth data, here's mine, are we soulmates? What would be your first answer right off the bat?
Well, I would say that astrology doesn't really tell us that. That's a mystery, right? Why two people end up together and stick together through thick and thin, whereas other relationships do not, is a bit of a mystery, right? What is this thing called love? I mean, fools can't explain it, and wise men never try. So why would I talk about love except to say that it is fundamental? It's a fundamental reality of the universe in which we live. And so astrology, I believe in a love-centered astrology that looks at symbolism in a loving way in terms of understanding the dynamics between people. The cases that I'm planning to look at, some of them are quite controversial, and my partner was saying, "Oh, Michael, it could be divisive if you do this couple." I haven't made final decisions on the case studies I'm going to present, but And I said, well, astrologers have to learn to love their client, right? That's part of the discipline. When you're in session with someone, when you're working on their chart, you are loving that person. You are loving them where they are with it now, today. That's the task of the astrologer, is part of the magic of the session, of why it is so healing, is because we can look at these configurations and see where a client is in tackling that challenge and providing useful and timely advice on how to best work with who they are and the influences coming into their lives.
And so I would love for us to touch on just a little bit so that people understand areas that you're going to be covering, because this is like a very comprehensive course that I think so many people are going to get so much out of. You are going to start off by talking about the zodiac signs. Like, I mean, that is always something that a lot of people look at. Like, I was just visiting with friends. One is a Scorpio, the other is a Virgo. And they were like, oh my God, we read something that said we're not good together and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, really? But yeah, that's one way that people come to astrology, is they look at compatibility and relationships and zodiac signs. So how are you going to be covering it?
Well, I'm going to go through the types of pairings of signs and present compatibility theory, a rational compatibility theory of the 12 signs with every other sign. I'm not going to go through every combination with every combination, because that's we don't have time. But we do have time to talk about the quality of the relationships between signs and why they work. For example, why Virgo and Virgo and Scorpio might work is because they exist they're complementary elements. Earth and water are complementary. They work well together. So there's both security-driven type energies. So when you're looking at that combination, you can say that's a harmonious one. I would say that that's more likely to be a harmonious one than not, because there's a basic understanding of that person. So that said, I do believe that any sign can work with any sign, and you have to look at the whole chart. You can't just base it on sun sign. But having a good sun sign relationship is helpful, because a good connection is helpful, even if there isn't an aspect. If they're in those complementary signs, then it can be helpful from a compatibility perspective. Astrology doesn't show love. Love is a mystery, but astrology is really good at showing compatibility and if things will work out or not, and how they will work if they're together, how you can be together with someone so much.
And then you'll be talking about houses and angles and relationships. Now, this is something I was really curious about. How are you going to be approaching this? Because I know how you are and how you teach, right? You like to get people thinking astrologically. So it's not about necessarily being a cookbook about it. It's more about saying, okay, understand this, and then you'll be able to grasp it, and you'll be able to run with that and be able to give a really good insight. And so talk a little bit about the second class. Is it looking at houses and angles in the natal chart, in the synastry chart? Okay, natal chart.
We're going to look at the natal chart in the second lesson, focusing on the houses that are involved in relationship. And of course, to some degree, as I'll point out in the lecture, it's all of the houses play a role can be said to play a role in a relational sense. Even the first house, which normally you would think, well, the first house represents self. It's me. It's who I am. It's my birth. It's my entry into the world. How could that possibly be anything other than me? But it also is very much the sense of being what your relationship is with yourself on a fundamental bedrock level. That's also what it's about. So that it describes that connection, and the nature of that connection colors your interpretation of life. If you're loving yourself, if you're really compassionately loving yourself and standing up to, the bullies inside that want to beat us up, if you're really loving yourself and giving yourself that affirmation, then that colors your perspective of your entire environment. Whereas if you're not loving yourself, if you're seeing yourself as intrinsically bad or flawed or, dwelling. Not to say that one shouldn't be critical of self, but one should be capable of being compassionate and loving with self. And that's about the ascendant. That's about your connection to the ascendant, and by extension, the first house.
And so I know that when you talk about houses, you also, because you and I have had discussions around this, the fifth, the sixth, the seven, the eight. Normally people skip that sixth house where it comes to understanding love. So can you describe a little bit about that journey, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth? Like, what do we need to understand about love? And if you want, you can even go back. You already talked about the first house, but that journey to love, can you go through the houses, like maybe very quickly, just so that people can start looking at their own chart a little bit differently, understanding their houses from a love perspective a little bit differently?
Well, the second house is about your relationship with your body, with your physicality, right? Your body as a possession, right? As it's also the stuff you produce, right? The extensions of your body. I mean, originally when we were babies, of course, it was baby product, right? But as we get older, there's other things we produce, and that's very much the second house. It's your relationship to that stuff, but it's also fundamentally your relationship to your body, right? Third house is siblings and your environment, your local environment that you're connecting to, the grocer, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, whoever's in your locale. Fourth house is a very important house from a relational perspective because you've crossed over the IC line into the setting half of the chart. And so it's a very relational place, which represents one's families, one's roots, one's inheritance in that sense. One parent, it's controversial over which parent is reflected by which house. And sometimes they play a switcheroo, but generally speaking, the way I read, the fourth house is father. Or at least contributes to the story about father. Fifth house is when fifth house.
Just before you jump into the fifth house, there were two quick things that came up there. So you talked about the setting half of the chart, right? So just explain, what do you mean when you say setting half and when you say rising half? That's the first question. Okay.
The setting half of the chart is houses 4 through 9. And the rising part of the chart is 10 through 3. So if you imagine the circle in terms of that the sun rises in the east, culminates and sets, goes under the horizon, reaches the midnight position, and rises again. Well, everything does that. Everything does that. All the stars in the heavens all revolve around the earth, or so we thought. From our perspective, they do. So from where we are, that's what we see, that's what we experience. And astrology is very much about the language of human experience, not the literal truth, but the language of human experience. So this is, the sun does those things, all the stars and planets do those things. So as you go through the houses, if you once you cross from the third to the fourth, you're now in the setting side of the chart. And the setting side of the chart, just as much as the first house is identified very strongly with self, the setting side of the chart is represented by other people in general. But specifically, we'll talk about it when we get to the seventh. We haven't gotten to the seventh yet.
Yeah, we'll get there in just a moment. And just the other thing I wanted to say was, you talked about the switcheroo. And so when you talked about the switcheroo, what you're doing is you're talking about the fourth versus the 10th.
Yes,
and so some people like to associate mom with the fourth and father with the 10th, but you see it as the father is the fourth and the mom is the 10th. That's how you see it.
Well, mother is the family. The mother is the parent of fact, right? There's no dispute about who your mother is, ever, right? It's obvious who your mother is, right? Because she gives birth to you in a physical way. It's demonstrable. It is a fact who your mother is. Now, your father, well, even mom may not know for sure, right? So that's the hidden parent in a way. Like the father is the remote linked parent, represented by the fourth house. But sometimes you look at a chart and go and you talk to people about their experience, and it's like, no, it's like, no, that's not what happened at all for them. Is that father is most assuredly 10th house, particularly if he's got placements that line up with that sign, for example, in his own natal chart. can overwhelm the projection of the person's horoscope onto his or her parental units, as it were. But generally speaking, the fourth house represents father and is a frame, as all things in astrology are. It is a lens for looking at the truth, right? This is the point that I'm always making in my lectures, is that astrology is a lens for looking at the truth. It's like the astrology of it is just a way of seeing, getting to something. It's not, objectively true. It's what you get out of it that's important, right? It's what the tool does for you. I mean, a hammer is just a hammer is just a hammer, unless you're hammering nails, and then it's incredibly useful. Well, it's the same with astrology. You have to use it. It's not just something to hang around. You have to use it. You have to use it to see. So the fourth house is father, the way I see it. Generally speaking, although there are exceptions, some people believe that you can see both parents in both houses, both the 10th house and the fourth house. But one plays one part and one plays the other. It's an interesting game, playing drawing out the parental story in a client's chart, talking about their parents, if that's something that comes up in the session.
Yeah, figuring out who's who for that particular person and how they understand their parents, for sure. Okay, so now we are going to get to the actual love houses. I know lots of people watching this are waiting with bated breath. Okay, these love houses, starting with the fifth house. Why do you see this as the beginning of love?
Well, the fifth house is fun. The fifth
romantic
house
love
is going on a date. It's amusements, it's play, it's gambling, right? And love is a gamble. It's a risky enterprise, love, right? This kind of love, this romantic love, this sense of, to some degree, a little bit of hero worship that comes on with the fifth house. Like it's like, wow, I met this person and they're so terrific, and I'm just bowled over by how wonderful they are. And this is fifth house. And we just do such fun things together, and and our time in the sack is magical, and it's the most great thing that ever happened. This is the fifth house. This is the date, and this particular house gets way overemphasized in our culture. Like the expectation is that, okay, that's it, Nadiya, we're done. Let's stop at the fifth. We don't need to go any further. Like that's the relationships only get to the fifth house, but the fifth house represents the beginning of something. It's not how it's going to. It's not the whole story of how the relationship, the different developmental phases of a relationship, or the different places in life, which are the specific houses that are involved with relationship, that draw out relational themes. So the fifth house is a magical, wonderful place where you fall in love and you hero worship and you think the other person is perfect, and you gaze into each other's eyes and you say, we must have known each other in a past life because it's just so wonderful, right? That's the fifth.
And it's such a personal thing. That's the thing. I remember someone once said to me that for the first 5.5, 6 months, you really don't know this person. So much of it is your own experience, your own hopes, your own wishes and desires and fantasies. And yeah, you may feel like you know this person, but it really is like best face forward up until you get to that, right around the 6-month mark. And so yeah, it remains such a personal experience of your own romantic inclination before you're really considering who this other person really is. And it is the sixth house that starts to show us that, right?
Well, the sixth house is, what happens when you get two people who've been dating for a while, just to continue our scenario. They've been dating for a while, and now stuff is being left in each other's places. And they're having to deal with how people are squeezing the toothpaste, right? And who's going to the bathroom when, and how long they're staying there, and all the details of life, right? In terms of collaboration is the sixth house, right? How do you navigate the rituals of life? We get up in the morning, or we go to bed at night, who's making what, who's looking after the dinners, who's cleaning, who's taking care of business, and on and on and on. Those details, that very sort of material details of life that support the relationship, support the structure of the relationship, are so important for the relationship. You navigate and negotiate all those deals, right? And you make all those arrangements. And there is inevitably in this process, there is the price of admission, right? You find not so perfect after all, or they don't do this so well, or they don't do that so well. So you have to accept this and you have to accept that. And that's the real test, right? It's really, my mother used to say, and I really think it's true, that love is not a feeling. Love is a choice. You're making a choice, right? You're choosing to love somebody. So it's real easy when you're in the fifth house and you're in love. It's easy to be loving when you're in love. But what happens when you're in hate? Then what can you do? Can you still be loving when you're in hate? Because if you fall in love, you're going to fall in hate. And sometimes finding imperfections in your partner can be deal breakers even. But if the love is to continue, it's about learning to accept the price of admission. Well, if I'm going to be with this person, this is what it means. This is what it means for me in terms of this is the price I have to pay. And at the end of that process, unless you want to talk more about the sixth.
Well, let's go to the seventh, because I know lots of people are waiting for that with bated breath too.
Well, the seventh gets a lot of emphasis in our culture because it's where you make the contract. It's marriage, right? It's the marriage partner is represented by the seventh. Psychologically, this is often interpreted as this is what you project out onto your partner, what you're looking for in your partner, what you need from your partner is this descendant of the seventh house to complete you in a way as your partner in crime, your significant other, the person that is there for you when you need somebody to be there for you. So it's the deal. But the interesting thing about the seventh house is that it's also your open enemies, the enemies that are coming at you. And this is that you can see. And this is because the nature of the seventh is you want this very objective, clear seeing in the seventh, right? It's like you've negotiated through the sixth where you go, like, there's all these flaws I'm going to have to live with. What am I going to live with? What's the deal that we're going to make if we're going to get married? Knowing what we know today, having been together as long as we've been together, what is the contract? What's the deal? What is the arrangement between us that we're going to be going forward? That's the seventh. It's a wonderful place, and it's celebrated in every culture. People have been getting married for a long, long time, and it's celebrated in every culture, I believe, around the world. There's something magical about the mystery of the two becoming one. It's incredible.
And so that tends to be a lot of the emphasis where it comes to relationships. But then after the seventh, we get to the eighth house. How do you understand that in the context of love?
Well, the eighth house is where, that deal that we made, I want to change it, right? I've discovered something, or something has happened, or there's some deeper level of truth that has to be addressed. The eighth house is how, amongst others, it's a place where we deal with crisis and transformation. And so it's about places, it's about change in relationship and managing turbulence in relationship, and where things have to be, where the deal has to be renegotiated. And it can be a frightening place because your partner can look like, where once upon a time they looked like an angel who could do no good. In the eighth, they can look like the devil who can do nothing but bad, right? It's like they're the projection of one's darkness, one's shadow. One has to encounter that in the eighth house. The eighth house is it's a very popular saying, shadow work. The eighth house is very wrapped up in the shadow, very, very wrapped up in dealing with the underside of things. And in relationship, there's, people bring their baggage in from their families and their own experience, And over time, certain things may surface that require the relationship to go through some kind of adjustment. Some the deal has to be changed in some way, and that's the eighth.
So, do you understand the rest of the houses from a love perspective? Because I know that those fourth really are the biggies where when it is we're looking at partnerships. But yeah, what about the eighth, the ninth, like how would you put that into context of love?
Well, I
Even
mean,
just very quickly.
to appropriate a term, the ninth is, your love for your guru, right? Whatever your higher teacher is, teaching vehicle is, whether it be, whatever great tradition, if it's a great religious tradition, or if it's something that you're in terms of your own spirituality, your own religious views of how the universe is, whatever that is the ninth, and how you feel about it is the ninth. So that's that you're really, it's a very important relationship because it can be one's relationship to, God images come from the ninth, what we think God is, how the super transcendent, magnificent, indescribable one has many faces, many views, many perspectives. And so you put planets in the ninth, and that person can look at that planet and think, well, this is what God is like. And if there's difficult placements there, that can be a challenge. Or they have to find some unorthodox way of working with that particular energy. But the ninth is one's relationship to one's sense of the universe, right? One's connection to the higher source. A very important house from a relational perspective.
And the 10th?
Well, mommy, right? Well, the way I see
you were saying, the switcheroo. You talked about that. Yeah.
But it's also the love for one's profession, one's role, one's contribution that one can make in the world, one's ability to influence others and be, a healing force for others, right? So love does not escape the 10th. It permeates that as well in terms of the loving contribution that you're trying to make to the world, to the larger humanity. So it gets more and more social as it goes, right?
Yeah. Like the 11th would be friendship, right? Love for friends.
Friends, colleagues, people that share similar interests to you, people of like mind, right? You don't have to necessarily have a lot of friends to have like physical friends to be an 11th house person. There could be authors that really speak to you that have a like mind with who you are. So it doesn't have to necessarily be other people, but it's certainly, that is the way the 11th tends to go. It's like if you talk to people have significant placements in the 11th, it's like, oh yeah, well, no surprise, he's a hockey player. He has Mars in the 11th house in Libra. So, I mean, that's it's easy to see how it can become a group activity, a larger group of acquaintances that extend beyond one's professional life. And then the
12th, love for source.
Well, I mean, again, it's like the 12th is the ending and the beginning, right? It's where it all turns on itself. So it's, it can be love for the entire cosmos, of everything, right? The ninth, different from the ninth. The ninth is one's ideas and views and beliefs about it. The 12th is more experiential, right? It's like you go to the ashram and you meditate for hours and you come out of it transformed because of the experience. That's the 12th house, kind of positive 12th house thing to do. So the 12th house can be a relationship to everything, or it can be about, most oneself. I often tell 12th house people that they desperately need to have time on their own, because if they don't get time on their own, they get kind of goofy. They get sort of possessed by the energies around them, and they can be contaminated easily. So that getting that solitude is also, so it can be, again, we return to the relationship of yourself in this mystical connection to the universe kind of sense.
It's incredible to consider how it is that the entire chart, just like the entire cosmos, I could say, has so much to do with love and the different expressions of love and the different way we find love, or the ways in which we find love in the world, within ourselves, how it evolves, how it grows. It's very powerful. Well, you can see here that Michael Barwick knows a whole lot about love just from that understanding of the 12th houses. Whether you understand that, look, we're all taking a journey through those 12 houses, but there's so many ways to apply that. I would imagine you can look at natal planet placements. You could look at planets transiting through these houses so that you understand where you are in terms of your own journey in love. That can be really powerful. And of course, Michael's going to be talking about a whole other bunch of things over 5 classes. Michael Barwick is back at Synchronicity University, where you've got just a couple of weeks left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class, an unheard of rate to learn all about love for 5 weeks and all the ways in which you can see love astrologically. So other classes are going to look at planets and relationships, synastry and aspects, and relationship horoscopes as well. And so synastry is basically how 2 charts speak to each other, and composite is midpoint method, the charts together. Can you just touch on how people can understand the difference?
Well, synastry relates to actual placements in the heavens. So if you have, let's just say you have the sun in Capricorn and somebody has the moon in Capricorn, then you could, if they're close enough by degree, they would be conjunct, sun conjunct moon, which would be a very nice relationship indicator. It's a nice connection. Sun moon is a good connection between people, because the moon needs what the sun is, and the sun needs what the moon nurtures with. So you put the 2 of them together, it's a very comfortable combination. So you could do this with other pairs of planets, in terms of Venus Mars or Venus Pluto, or any combination of planets can be related by the aspects, these indications of relationship, or as you like to put so succinctly, the ability of the planets to maintain conversations with each other. You can look at the conversations happening between 2 charts. This gives you a sense of compatibility, or more accurately, it gives you a sense of where there's compatibility and where there is, disharmony, where there's challenge, right? You're going to always find, a little bit of more than one story going on, because nobody gets a perfect match. It just doesn't work that way.
Sometimes people freak out when they think, oh, disharmony and things like that. But you need a little bit of that for the spark to be there. I mean, I have found, charts where it's just all harmony. I mean, the person just feels like a sibling. It doesn't really feel like something. But when there's a mix of challenge and harmony, then it's like the spark is there. And you also don't want too much challenge, because then it's exhausting, right?
Well, I hear you, but I think some people like the fight. Like that they're better. Like, this gets to the whole mystery of why people end up together, and how, and why some couples endure and others don't, and a larger philosophical discussion of relationships, the role of relationships in our lives, which I'm going to touch on, because I think it's fundamental. It's fundamental to who we are. It defines us. Our relationships define us. We are who we connect to. Like, it's so fundamentally true. So whether you're talking about a friend or a significant other or a family member, it's these are all significant in terms of defining you. And quite frankly, these are all opportunities for love and healing, channels for that influence that you exert in the world. So that's that. The synastry gives us an insight into how the dynamics between 2 people. But when I say disharmony, sometimes the most beautiful music is created by using disharmonious notes. Like, it's wrong, but it's right. And that's, again, that is part of the mystery of love. The mystery of love, how we look at the dynamics between 2 charts, and we understand something of how we get triggered by the other, and what parts of us get triggered by the other, and how they get triggered. That's what we get. But the composite is where you take the midpoint. So if we have a sun at 0 degrees of Aries, and you have a sun at 0 degrees of Gemini, then the midpoint of 0 degrees Aries and 0 degrees Gemini is 0 degrees Taurus. So In that case, the composite sun would end up at 0 degrees Taurus. And you do this for each pairing of the planets. So moon to moon, Mercury to Mercury, Venus to Venus, Mars to Mars, and so forth.
But keep in mind, it's not that you have to do that manually. Computers do all of that right now. Just letting everybody know, those who are not familiar with composite charts. And this is a very common technique. It is something that a lot of us as astrologers incorporate in our own lives, and also when we read charts, to look at the relationship itself as an entity. So it is just one technique. But yeah, you don't have to figure that out yourself. I mean, it's very, very easy. Anywhere where you generate a chart, we'll figure out a way to let you generate that composite chart. Yeah.
There's plenty of places that will do the calculations for you, I'm sure, on the net, and certainly software will do it. It's easy. I mean, there's easy peasy. There's no shortage of data that can be generated with the computers that we have. Astrological data. If you want astrological data, if you want composite charts, you can create them. That's not the issue. The issue is how to make sense out of it all. That's the issue, right? It's particularly, so I'm going to keep it real simple to illustrate what needs to be illustrated, and then people are free to incorporate whatever else they want to incorporate into the framework. But I'm going to be giving people a real fundamental framework in terms of how to look at relationships and how to work with them. To go back to the composite chart, it gives us a picture of the relationship as a separate entity. And, by rights, I mean, a lot of people, when they first encounter this technique, think, oh, this shouldn't work. But it does work. That's the weird thing about it. Like, the composite chart will respond to transits even, which is, in terms of significant points in the relationship, will be marked by a transit of some kind. And there's something magical about it. So it gives us something as the relationship as a separate entity in terms of its dynamics and what's going on there. It's a little, you have to read it slightly differently in terms of houses, planets, and signs. Well, not so much signs, but planets and houses. It's also a very revealing technique. And, so we'll review that in the 5th and final class of the series.
And that is actually one of my favorite techniques. Like, if I'm connecting with someone new, I generate that composite and I look at what could be coming up in terms of transits to the composite. And it's incredible how it always lines up. It just is such a powerful technique that works, that astrologers have been using for such a long time. So I'm so glad you'll be incorporating that into your class as well. And so once again, everybody, Michael Barwick is back at Synchronicity University. I know so many of us are going to be so excited. I'm very excited that he's coming back, this time with a 5-week course all about relationships. Perfect to sign up for in February and start in March. You've got just a couple of weeks left to choose your tuition rate, as low as just $5 a class, to talk about love and learn about love in astrology for 5 full weeks. Well, Michael Barwick, I love you. Thank you for being here. Once again, thank you.
Always a pleasure to hang out with you, Nadiya. Always a pleasure. When are we going to get together next?
Oh, my goodness. Well, look, we get together online all the time, but I am sure that we will hug in person in perfect time. We always do that too.
We always do.
And thank you. Thank you again, Michael. So excited to have you back. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching. And until we connect again, take care. Bye.